Hello and welcome back to Lessons in Attachment. If you've ever found yourself obsessing over someone from the past, but particularly you keep replaying the good times, you keep kind of reminiscing and thinking about what you loved about this person and all of the good parts of this relationship. If that's you, then this episode is full of gems and takeaways just for you. I'm Carly Ann. I'm a therapist and life coach. I help people to overcome anxiety issues. That includes anxious attachment, as you probably know, worry, overthinking, playing small due to limiting beliefs that you hold in life and love. And if you're new here, a huge hello. If you're returning, welcome back. Make sure that you're following me on Instagram, carly.ann_, and send me a message. Let me know what those gems, aha moments, and key takeaways are for you from this episode. And as always, if there is something that you want me to expand on, please let me know. And if it's relevant and if plenty of you ask, it may be one that I record in the future. So it is definitely worth sending that message. Basically, guys, recently inside my 21-day challenge, Stuck to Secure, someone asked me a question that when I heard it, I had like flashbacks myself, being like, wow, I know that I have done that so many times. And I also knew this is not the first time I've been asked about this. I've actually worked with people on this one-to-one. I have heard relationship experts talk about this as well. So I just knew as soon as I heard it, like I've got to record an episode on this because I know this person is not the only one going through this. So you may have guessed, but the question was around, why do I keep going over the good times with this person, even though I know they hurt me? And I think that's really key. Yeah, especially if you're someone who relates to anxious attachment, you know that you fall really hard, fall really quick, tend to dismiss red flags, things like that. But I know that many of you listening will be like, yeah, that are you describing me? And let's be honest, when there is that inner conflict, that is really confusing. Any kind of inner conflict is confusing. Yeah, you know the relationship wasn't right. You remember the heartbreak, the distance, the letdowns, and yet your mind keeps going and drifting back to the smiles, the laughs, the cuddles, the good times, the niceness of it, the when it felt okay. Yeah, sometimes in those moments it can feel like I'm never going to be able to move on because those memories seem to pull you right back in. And sometimes you'll feel like you have made progress, and then you'll find yourself again being like, oh, but gosh, that was so good. And it's not even just that, you will feel it. You'll literally feel an ache that that's gone. You'll feel a sadness that that isn't reality right now. But paradoxically, as you all hear, it is actually also a way to try and protect yourself. Shock horror. How many of the things that we talk about on lessons in attachment do we end up realizing, whether it's your inner critic, your anxious attachment, there is that self-protection going on. So often, we are designed to protect ourselves, and very often that's what's going on. Reason number one, believe it or not, your brain is trying to reduce the pain. The good memories are actually like a temporary escape. Okay, stay with me on this one. When someone that you were attached to, sometimes deeply attached to, is no longer in your life, it can really feel like a part of you is missing, and that hurts. Yeah, so that's that pain. So what does your mind do? It tries to soothe you. It goes back and it plays a moment that once made you feel good. It made you feel safe. Maybe it made you feel loved or connected. Your brain is saying, remember when they would text and say that they missed you? Remember when you would get that morning text? Remember when they held your hand at dinner and it felt like nothing else mattered? So you will replay these moments where it felt good. When you are remembering that, it provides relief. Believe it or not, even if it is just for a second, those good memories can give you a tiny hit of comfort, and that becomes a coping mechanism. And if it worked, if it did provide some relief, that's when we find ourselves getting in a loop. Yeah, the temporary relief becomes a loop because your brain has just learned that remembering that good time reduced some of that ache that I was talking about. It reduced some of that anxiety. Suddenly, you're stuck in a cycle of obsessing and going over it again and again. I know it still feels bad, but what I'm saying is that moment of remembering the good, that is just like a tiny pause from reality. So it's this tiny bit of relief that can be hard to observe. And sadly, what that does is it actually makes the pain last longer because we stay in this loop of remembering the good times. So I want you to try this instead. Next time you are recalling that positive memory and going over it, I want you to pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, you can write it down or ask yourself mentally, what pain or fear am I avoiding by thinking of this? Get really curious. What am I avoiding feeling by going over these good memories? And validate what you discover. Of course, I'm hurting. Of course, I miss that. Just naming that deeper underlying pain can soften the urge to keep going back to that same memory. Instead, you're really getting to those deeper roots. The second reason is that your mind edits the story, so it highlights the good and it fades out the rest. I feel like here is good to use an example. So, have you ever been on a holiday and years later you just think, oh, that was amazing. I had the best holiday ever. And really, if we look at it, you've probably forgotten maybe a delayed flight or a dodgy meal, the day you argued with your travel buddy. And this is how the memory works. I've heard this called rosy retrospection, which I love. Your brain is focusing on the highs and it shows up hard after a breakup or, a loss of a friendship. You recall the nights where you laughed until your stomach hurt, the random compliments. Again, really remembering those moments where you felt seen. And your mind cuts out the confusion, it cuts out the letdowns, it cuts out whatever it was that depleted you about this relationship and wasn't working for you. You're not wrong for remembering the good. You're not wrong for doing that. It's just that when you forget or blur out the inconsistencies or what wasn't good, the red flags a lot of the time, the good then starts to become even rosier. It looks even better than it was. Yeah, so it's so easy for us to ignore what wasn't working, especially when things come to an end. It really seems like this rosy retrospection will happen after the fact. There might be a moment where you're in the situation where you kind of know this isn't right. And then afterwards, when there seems to be some kind of ending, a feeling of rejection, a feeling of, being left in some way, that sense of abandonment, you might find that you do this even more, that you fall into this pattern. And that's why, because you are fading out and you're ignoring the reality. So try this instead. I want you to create a reality list. Draw a line down the middle of a piece of paper, right? So that you've split the page in half. And on one side, you can write down the good memories that you keep replaying. But on the other side, I want you to write down the parts that you tend to forget, the patterns that hurt you, the parts that weren't so good, things that were said that hurt you and, weren't so rosy. The way that there was uncertainty and you were unsure and there was anxiety. Try and just balance it out a bit. This isn't about taking on a negative mindset, not at all. It's about balance, and we've got to balance it out. You've got to see a bit of reality, because otherwise You're going to keep on only looking at the positives, blurring out the negatives like your brain does. And that is going to be no use for you when it comes to moving on. And listen, I will just say the episode right before the one that you're listening to now, I actually share an exercise on radical acceptance. So you may well want to go and check that out too. The third reason is that you're craving the feeling, not just the person. Sometimes you're not missing the person in that memory. It seems like it is, and you'll be telling yourself it is. But a lot of the time, when we break it down, it's the feeling that you had in that memory. It's the feeling that you had when you were with them. Maybe you felt alive, desired, safe, wanted, chosen. Maybe they made you feel special in a way that no one else had. And now that that's gone, it feels like you lost access to that version of yourself. And what I want you to come back to is that that feeling you're craving, it came from inside you. I know that it was sparked by that relationship, but it wasn't theirs. It was your feeling. Your mind has just attached that to them because it felt easier to access when they were around. But that feeling is yours. And because you felt it in your body, that means that you have the capacity to feel it again in new relationships, in real connection, and how you show up for yourself. That might be really hard to believe, but you have access to that feeling. You just have to stop putting that feeling in their hands. You're taking this feeling that was important to you and that you keep going over. It seems like you're going over the memory, but there will be something about the feeling. And you're saying, I can only have that with them. And I'm saying, what if that's not true? So try this instead. Ask yourself, what feeling do I miss the most when I think of them? What feeling do I miss the most when I'm going over these positive memories? When you've got an idea of the feeling that you're craving, then you can list out other ways that you could start accessing that feeling again. And you're going to have to dig deep. You're going to have to challenge your inner critic that says that's not possible. Only that person can create that feeling for me. You're going to have to challenge that. And some of you will. Some of you will challenge that because I know that some of you are absolutely determined to break this cycle. And those of you that are, you will get an idea of what that feeling is, and you will find ways to create that in your life and you'll feel into that. I'm not saying it's going to be a 100% replacement, but I am saying that you're able to think outside the box and lean into that feeling as much as possible. And even 1% of creating that feeling yourself, you're winning. If you miss feeling loved, where else do you even feel a tiny spark of that? From another friend, a pet, a moment of self-kindness. Like I say, even a 1% version of that feeling built today, created today, that will move you forward. That will be another way that you kind of cut that tie to you continuing going over these old positive memories. If your mind keeps looping back on the good times of someone who's no longer in your life, hopefully this episode shows you that that is happening for many other people as well. You're not weak, you're not silly for doing this, you're not doing the work wrong. You're in a very normal situation, experiencing a longing for connection, for meaning, for someone from your past, but you don't have to stay stuck there. Yeah, you do not have to stay stuck there. And I'm inviting you to take some action from this episode, whatever it is that speaks to you the most. But what I will say is this: the good times happened. It's not in your head. The good times happened and they mattered. And that's okay. You're allowed to have those memories. But they're not a reason to stay tied to something or someone that's no longer in your present or that's getting in the way of you living your bigger life. You living the life that is aligned to you and a life that's meaningful to you, or meeting someone new or engaging in your current relationship, or other friendships. If you want more tools, if you feel like you're stuck in that in between place of not knowing how to stop obsessing, join the Attachment Recovery Gym. It is full of tools, full of resources to help you to self soothe, interrupt anxious patterns, and become more secure. I hope you found this useful. Like I said, follow me on Instagram, carly.ann_, and I will be back here very soon.